Before we begin, if you love true crime stories that twist your mind and haunt your thoughts, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell us what you think in the comments. Because what you're about to hear stayed buried for 2 decades. It started on a freezing November night in 2001 in the quiet town of Elridge, Pennsylvania. The kind of place where everyone waved at each other and locked their doors only when the wind howled too hard. But that night, the wind wasn't the only thing howling. A 911 call shattered the silence. A teenage girl, breathless and terrified, screamed into the phone. "She's gone. There's blood everywhere, and the door's wide open." By the time police arrived at the small suburban home on Wexler Drive, the front porch light flickered weakly, illuminating a scene that didn't make sense. The living room showed no sign of forced entry. The TV still played a late-night sitcom. But down the hallway, a streak of blood led to a shattered picture frame, and then to an open back door swinging in the cold wind. The missing person was Emily Carter, 27 years old, a beloved art teacher known for her soft voice and radiant smile. Her fiancé, Daniel Briggs, was the one who made the 911 call. He told police he came home after a late shift at the diner to find the house empty, Emily's phone still charging on the counter, and her car still in the driveway. "She wouldn't just leave," he insisted, voice shaking. "Something's wrong. Please find her." Detective Laura Kent was assigned to the case, a calm, methodical investigator with a reputation for never letting go of a lead. Her first impression was unsettling. Too much emotion in Daniel's voice, yet his eyes looked dry. The house felt staged, almost like someone wanted it to look like a kidnapping. But there was one thing that didn't fit. A single muddy footprint near the back door, pointing into the house, not out of it. Over the next few days, Elridge transformed from peaceful to paranoid. Flyers with Emily's photo covered every lamppost. Volunteers searched the nearby woods, ditches, and abandoned barns. News vans parked along the main road. Everyone had a theory. Some said it was a stranger. Others whispered about Daniel's temper. But as the investigation deepened, every clue seemed to twist the story further. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Daniel's car parked there around 10:45 p.m., just minutes before he said he arrived home. He claimed he stopped for coffee, but the clerk didn't remember seeing him that night. Then came the blood analysis. The samples in the hallway matched Emily's, but the drops leading to the back door contained traces of another person's DNA. It wasn't Daniel's. And it wasn't anyone in the police database. The case spiraled into confusion. Detectives questioned Emily's coworkers, friends, even her students' parents. A few mentioned she'd been worried lately, checking her car locks twice, leaving work early. Someone had been calling her repeatedly from an unknown number. But the record showed those calls came from a prepaid phone, untraceable, bought in cash. Days turned into weeks. With no sign of Emily, the case went cold fast. Daniel's alibi remained unproven, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. The media moved on, and life in Elridge slowly returned to its cautious normal. Yet Detective Kent never forgot the look in Daniel's eyes that night, the flicker of something she couldn't name. 20 years passed. Files were boxed up, moved to archives. New detectives came and went. Then, in 2021, a storm hit Elridge, not from the sky, but from the lab. A DNA backlog project was underway, retesting samples from old cases with new technology. When the results for the Carter file came back, they triggered an automatic alert. The unknown DNA from the blood trail behind Emily's house finally matched someone, Thomas Briggs, Daniel's older brother, who had died in a car crash in 2006. The revelation cracked the case wide open. Why had Daniel's brother been at the scene that night? And if he was, what had really happened to Emily Carter? Detective Kent, now retired, received a call from her former partner. "Laura, you might want to sit down. They found something in the Briggs family storage unit. Something old, something that shouldn't be there." Because when the police opened that storage locker on the outskirts of town, tucked between stacks of boxes and rusted tools, they found a sealed container wrapped in duct tape and plastic. Inside it lay the key piece of evidence that had been missing for 20 years. And what was inside that container? changed everything. Before we dive into what was uncovered inside that forgotten storage locker, remember, every click, every like, every subscribe keeps these real stories alive. Because some cases deserve to be remembered, even when the truth cuts deep. When the lid of that container peeled open, the officers fell silent. Inside was a canvas bag, neatly folded, still damp from condensation. Inside the bag were women's clothes, a faded scarf, and a broken bracelet, all tagged and dated from 2001. Beneath it lay an old camcorder tape, labeled in shaky handwriting. November 11th. The tag sent shivers through Detective Laura Kent, who had been called back as a consultant. November 11th was the night Emily Carter vanished. The tape had likely been sitting there since the week she disappeared, hidden away, quietly waiting for technology to catch up. The camcorder was ancient, but the lab managed to digitize the footage. The first few minutes were ordinary, a home video, the Briggs brothers laughing at a backyard barbecue, beers in hand. But then the footage cut sharply. The next scene was dark, grainy, and clearly filmed at night. A single streetlight flickered above a familiar driveway, Emily Carter's house. The timestamp read 10:38 p.m., just 7 minutes before Daniel called 911. The tape showed someone tall, wearing a hood, walking toward the back of the house. The figure paused near the door, then vanished into the shadows. A minute later, a second person stepped into frame, shorter, leaner, moving differently. Two sets of figures, one scene, and then static. When the image cleared again, the camera was on the ground. Muffled voices echoed through the night. One of them was unmistakably Daniel's. The other matched Thomas's voice from an old family video found online. "Just take her." "I don't care anymore," I said. "Take her," a voice shouted. Then silence. The recording ended. The evidence was explosive, but incomplete. No image of Emily, no violence on camera, just words, shadows, and an admission that raised more questions than answers. What had Daniel meant by "take her"? Was it a setup, an abduction, or something far darker? Detective Kent flew to Elridge to confront Daniel, now in his 50s and running a used car dealership outside Pittsburgh. When she showed him the evidence, his face drained of color. He denied everything, said the tape was fake, that his brother had always been jealous, manipulative, and capable of anything. But his hands trembled when he heard the audio. The next day, Daniel disappeared. His car was found abandoned near an old service road leading to the Carter family's former summer cabin, a property untouched since Emily's disappearance. The cabin was deep in the woods, miles from the main road. When police arrived, they found the front door locked from the inside, and dust covered everything except one corner of the living room, where someone had recently moved the old rug. Underneath it lay a trapdoor, one that had never been mentioned in the original property records. The air beneath was heavy and stale. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing a small, unfinished cellar lined with concrete and wooden shelves. On one of the shelves sat a sealed metal box with a faded sticker that read, "Private EB." Inside were photos, dozens of them. Emily in her classroom. Emily at the grocery store. Emily walking her dog. Every photo had been taken from a distance, as if someone had been following her for months. And then there was a journal. The handwriting was careful, almost tender. The entries began innocent enough. "She's perfect. She doesn't even see me." Then they grew darker. "She keeps pulling away. Daniel doesn't deserve her. I'll make her understand." The signature at the bottom of every page. Thomas B. Detective Kent felt her stomach drop. The evidence was undeniable. Thomas had been obsessed with Emily long before her disappearance. But that left one haunting question. Did Daniel know? Further down in the box was a single photograph that didn't belong. It showed Emily sitting on a park bench, smiling. Behind her, blurred but recognizable, was Daniel, his hand resting on her shoulder. Next to him, half hidden in shadow, was Thomas, glaring straight into the camera. The caption scribbled on the back said, "She chose wrong." The discovery reopened every wound in Elridge. News broke that the case was active again, and the town that once thought it had moved on was suddenly dragged back into the storm. Then, 3 days later, another message arrived, this time to the police tip line. No name. Just a voice distorted through static. You're looking in the wrong place. Emily's not dead. Check the lake. The call traced back to a burner phone, registered under a false identity. But the voice sounded eerily familiar. Detective Kent replayed it over and over. Calm, deliberate, and aged but certain. She froze. It wasn't Thomas. It wasn't Daniel. It was someone she thought she'd never hear from again. Before we dive into the conclusion, if you followed this case from the start, hit that subscribe button. Because the truth you're about to hear, it's darker than anyone imagined. When the distorted voice said, "Check the lake," Detective Laura Kent didn't want to believe it. But deep down, she knew the caller was right. The Briggs family lake house had been one of the first places searched back in 2001, yet the waters were never fully dredged. 20 years ago, the technology wasn't what it is now, and Thomas's influence in town had quietly kept certain areas off limits. 2 days later, police divers gathered at Lake Meriden, its surface still and gray under a heavy autumn sky. Locals stood along the shore, silent, watching history reopen itself. The divers went under at dawn. By noon, the sonar scan pinged something metallic near the center, about 20 feet below the surface. When they pulled it up, the crowd gasped. It wasn't a car or a weapon. It was a metal barrel, sealed tight with corroded bolts and a chain wrapped around it. The markings were faint, but legible. Property of Briggs Construction, 2001. The forensic team cut it open carefully, their gloves slick with lake water. Inside were human remains, preserved by the cold mud and metal. A silver ring still clung to one finger, the same ring seen in Emily Carter's engagement photos. After 20 years, Emily had finally been found. The announcement spread like wildfire. News fans returned. Headlines screamed of betrayal, obsession, and cover-ups. Daniel Briggs was still missing, and with Thomas long dead, it seemed the answers had sunk to the bottom of the lake along with the barrel. But Detective Kent wasn't satisfied. Something about the call, that voice, kept clawing at her mind. She sent the audio to the lab for enhancement. The results came back the next morning. The voice matched Chief Warren Hale, her former superior, the man who'd led the original investigation in 2001. Kent's hands shook as she drove to his farmhouse outside of town. Hale had retired 5 years earlier, living quietly, tending to his garden, the picture of peace. When she arrived, he was already on the porch, as if expecting her. "Laura," he said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." She stared at him, the voice recording in her hand. "You knew where she was all along." He sighed, eyes heavy. "I didn't know, not exactly. But I knew enough to stay quiet." And then the story unraveled. 20 years ago, Hale had discovered a piece of evidence during the first search, a blood-stained tarp near the Briggs Lake property. But Thomas's father, Richard Briggs, was a major donor to the county. He'd quietly convinced Hale to label it inconclusive, promising that his sons would cooperate. Hale, desperate to save his department's funding, agreed. He never imagined how far the cover-up would go. But after Richard died in 2003, Thomas began spiraling. The obsession with Emily grew dangerous. Daniel, terrified of what his brother might do, tried to intervene, the night she vanished. The confrontation turned violent. Emily was caught in the middle. One moment of rage, one shove too hard, and she fell. Daniel panicked. Thomas helped him hide the body. And Hale, when he learned the truth days later, helped them bury it, literally and figuratively. He falsified reports, redirected searches, and destroyed logs, all to protect the department's reputation. Now, 2 decades later, guilt had consumed him. He made the anonymous call, hoping to end what he'd started. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said quietly. "But every night, I saw her face." Detective Kent sat in silence. The man who'd once mentored her had been part of the very corruption she'd spent her life fighting. Before she could respond, a phone buzzed inside the house. Hale looked at it, expression unreadable. "It's Daniel," he said. The call came through on speaker. The voice on the other end was trembling. "Laura,
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean for any of it to happen. Thomas, his voice broke. He wanted her. I wanted her safe. I thought if I scared her enough, she'd leave town. But when she fell, we just panicked. Kent's throat tightened. Where are you, Daniel? There was a pause, then a whisper. At the lake. Where it started. By the time police arrived, Daniel's car was parked by the water's edge. Inside was a folded letter addressed to Emily's parents and a small box containing her missing bracelet, the same one found in the storage unit. Daniel had walked into the lake before sunrise. The next morning, Detective Kent stood at the shoreline as the mist rolled over the water. The media called it closure. The town called it justice. But she knew better. It wasn't justice. It was guilt, buried and unearthed too late. As the divers packed their gear, she glanced down and noticed something glinting in the mud, a tiny silver locket, half buried. She picked it up and opened it. Inside was a photograph of Emily and Thomas, taken long before she'd ever met Daniel. Her pulse froze. Emily hadn't been just Thomas's obsession. She'd once loved him. That meant the story everyone believed, about obsession, betrayal, and an accidental death, wasn't the whole truth. Maybe Emily hadn't been entirely innocent in what happened that night. Maybe, just maybe, she'd provoked a chain of events no one could stop. As Kent stared out over the gray water, the wind carried the faint echo of the past, a voice from that old tape whispering, "Just take her. I don't care anymore." For 20 years, everyone thought they were chasing a killer. But in the end, they were chasing the consequences of a love triangle gone terribly wrong. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe because the truth we tell next might be closer to your home than you think.